We celebrate the 4th of July with an all-American LA Kings show on this edition of Locked on LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love for you to leave us a positive comment on Apple Podcasts if you're a fan of the show. And we are also on YouTube. Please like and subscribe if you're enjoying this content. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, 20 plus years, the Fox Sports Radio Network. I'm also co-host of the Puck Podcast. It's a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the past 16 years, and a passionate LA Kings fan for 30 years. Coming up, we have a special holiday-themed show that I hope you will find informative and entertaining. By the way, happy 4th of July to all of you out there celebrating our Independence Day here in the United States. I'm going to give you my all-time American-born LA Kings lineup. We've also got a profile of American-born Kings prospect Alex Turcotte, but we begin with a current LA King born in the USA. He's one of 6 US-born players currently on the Kings roster. Do not call him Wah. He is not French-Canadian. He is Kings defenseman Matt Roy. Maybe the best unknown member of the LA Kings. I can honestly say that I think I could pick out most LA Kings player if we were walking down the street and one of them was coming the other direction, but Matt Roy, maybe not. So let's get to know the man who was born in Canton, Michigan, a little bit better, because I think he's actually one of the better players on the Kings team. After 3 seasons at Michigan Tech, Matt Roy was a 7th-round pick of the LA Kings in the 2015 NHL draft. Not a lot of 7th-rounders make it to the NHL, much less be a very solid player at the NHL level. So good for Matt Roy for beating the odds. He's 28 years old, solid member of the Kings for many seasons now, 5 seasons in the NHL, patrolling the Kings blue line, and he's coming off his best NHL season of his career. He played every single game for the Kings this past season, so obviously reliable, 82 games in the regular season, 6 games in the playoffs. He finished with a career-high 9 goals and 26 points. Now, his 9 goals were tied for the team league amongst defensemen, along with Drew Doughty and former King Sean Durzi, and Matt Roy did not get the power play time of Drew Doughty and Sean Durzi. He's been a steady presence on the Kings' second pairing, which arguably this season may be their best. He's going to be teamed up with Vladislav Gavrikov, and that pairing is very, very solid. Going to be exciting to see those two paired together for an entire season. Of course, Gavrikov coming over late at the trade deadline to bolster the Kings' defensive core late in the season. Now, Matt Roy is a very fundamentally sound defenseman. That might sound boring, but it's not. He rarely makes a mistake. He is a good puck mover. He's a good skater. He's not afraid to jump up in the play when he feels that the time is right. And most of the time, he knows when the time is right. He's got a pretty good shot from the point, and he can play some physical game around the net and in the corners if necessary. But his best quality is probably his decision-making, which is crucial to being a good, reliable defenseman. Now, knowing when to jump up in the play is important, but more importantly, probably knowing when not to avoid odd man chances and breakaways going the other way. He's not flashy, but you know what you're going to get every time you put him out on the ice. And most of the time, it's going to be very good. Now, we've talked in the past about guys like Sean Durzi and sometimes even Drew Doughty when occasionally the puck gets on their stick and you might have to hold your breath a little bit. But that is not the case with Matt Roy. He also does a lot of the little things, or the dirty things, if you want to call it that helps a team win. He's a very good shot blocker, one of the top 10 shot blockers in the NHL last year. He had 153 block shots to lead the Kings. And while the Kings' penalty kill has its issues at times, not due to the play of Matt Roy, who is on the penalty kill, he's a guy that any coach would not be afraid to send over the boards in any crucial situation. So we've done this a little bit before when we've done player profiles in the past. Let's hear from Matt Roy, hear from him in his exit interview. This was the day after the Kings season came to an end. in the Game 6 playoff loss to the Oilers. Now, I'll be paraphrasing what the questions and answers were just to kind of streamline it a little bit. If you want to actually hear the entire exit interview, very easy to do. Just go to YouTube, search Matt Roy exit interview. It'll be the first thing that pops up. You'll see him and teammate Trevor Moore, another American-born King, by the way, who had his exit interview along with Matt Roy. Some of the players did it by themselves. Others had a teammate that they did it with. So it was Trevor Moore and Matt Roy together. And thanks to the Kings YouTube channel for posting the videos for all of us to watch and enjoy. The first question that Matt Roy was asked was kind of the obvious one, kind of the first question that everybody got asked, was about coming up short in the playoffs again against the Oilers. And he echoed what a lot of the Kings players said, that even though they lost in 6 games this year as opposed to 7 games the previous year, he thought the team played better, was better, and more competitive this time around in the postseason and could have very easily advanced out of the first round. He was asked about then restricted free agent defenseman and his defensive partner, Vladislav Gavrikov, and if he wanted him to be back on the Kings next season. And Roy said that Gabby was a great teammate, really good player, and yes, he wanted him to come back for the next season. And we all know that, in fact, Vladislav Gavrikov will be back. And again, looking forward to a full season of Matt Roy and Vladislav Gavrikov together on that second pairing. Roy was asked if being the Kings player representative to the union factored into his offseason plans. He said that he would have conversations with players and talk to the new union chief to keep the communications open and making sure that everyone's on the same page. I thought it was a pretty interesting question. It's not something you really think about much, and I did not know that Matt Roy was the Kings player rep to the union. Clearly, he must be a pretty smart guy off the ice as well, and wants to take on that extra responsibility of being the Kings player rep. Roy was asked about being undrafted and kind of being under the radar. And he said that he likes to get recognition, but he also likes going about his business and keeping the noise away, as he called it. It's probably part of the reason why Matt Roy is kind of an anonymous player for the Kings a little bit. Doesn't seem to do too many interviews, not too many things that I've noticed away from the ice. And again, by choice, he's kind of one of the Kings players who's a bit in the background in some respects. But when you look at the top players on the Kings, his name really should be brought up. As a member of the Kings penalty kill unit, he was asked what could the PK do better. He said that at times he felt it was too passive, but he also took time to credit how good the Oilers power play was. The final question for Matt Roy was asked about what we could expect from him going forward as far as his offensive side of the game. And he said that it was something that he tries to improve on every year and that he thought he did a better job picking his spots offensively this past season, and he wants to be even better next season. So those some of the words from Matt Roy, which we don't hear a lot from in his exit interview with the LA Kings. Now, the Kings have 3 big unrestricted free agents coming up after this season: Anze Kopitar, Victor Arvidsson, and Matt Roy, who's going into the final year of a 3-year extension with a cap hit of $3.15 million per season. And you can bet that he will be looking to get a deal similar to teammate Vladislav Gavrikov, who's getting almost $6 million per season. Now, Drew Doughty is still under contract for 4 more seasons. Brent Clark's expected to be the next big star for the Kings on the blue line on the right side. And Matt Roy may be a bit anonymous, but his play on the ice is anything but, and he'll be a key player for the Kings to re-sign coming up next season. So Matt Roy is one of the better American-born players on the LA Kings, one of the better players on the Kings roster as a whole. But up next, we're going to look at an LA King American-born prospect who we hope can turn into an LA King in the near future, maybe this season. That is next on Locked on LA Kings, your team every day. Take your first swing at betting on Major League Baseball on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets. That's up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend betting on everything from the money line to the over-under or who you think is going to hit the first home run, all on an app that is safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. There is no better place to bet on Major League Baseball than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. We continue our American themed show on this 4th of July as we look at one of the Kings' top American prospects, and that would be Alex Turcotte. Born in Island Lake, Illinois, he was the Kings' first round pick, fifth overall in the 2019 draft. Played on the U.S. national under 17, under 18, and under 20 teams. Not only did he win gold with Team USA at the World Junior Championships in 2021, he scored the game winning goal against Canada. After he was drafted by the Kings, he played one season for former King Tony Granato, more on him coming up, at the University of Wisconsin before turning pro. 3 seasons later, he's yet to play a full professional season due to injuries, including a pair of severe concussions season before last. Now, at the time he was drafted, he was pretty much a no-brainer pick. He had played with some elite players in the U.S. developmental programs that are currently stars in the NHL, like Jack Hughes in New Jersey, Cole Caulfield in Montreal, Matty Beniers in Seattle, and Trevor Zegras in Anaheim. And when he played alongside those guys, he never looked out of place. He looked like he was one of those type of players. Now, at some point, you look at Kings draft picks and you see, we've talked about it before when we reviewed some of the drafts, who are hits and who are misses. And right now, it's not really fair to say Alex Turcotte was a miss by the Kings scouts and their organization. When he was picked, it was a good pick. It was the right pick. And everyone had him rated as a top 5 pick. And everyone would have taken him high in the first round. Now, unlike the Kings' first round pick this year, Jakub Dvorak, who we know has had injury issues, and you knew that going into making the selection, and you know there's a risk there. That wasn't the case with Alex Turcotte when they picked him. He wasn't known as a guy that was injury prone. Now, unfortunately, the injury issues have slowed his development and his opportunities to show that he can be an NHL caliber player. He's only played in 12 NHL games so far and has yet to score a point in an NHL game. In 91 career AHL games over 3 seasons, he's got 18 goals and 38 assists for 56 points. Now, coming out of the draft, he was considered a complete player, a guy that is solid at both ends of the ice. He's got a good all-around game. He could score. He could set teammates up. He's not a liability defensively. One of his coaches described him as sandpaper and silk. In other words, he had the silky hands and moves on the offensive side, but also had an edge to his game. And unfortunately, one of his greatest attributes might end up hurting his chances to stay healthy. He likes to be physical. He likes to be involved in board battles. He likes to go into the corners, and he goes hard to the net. And those are great qualities to have in a hockey player, generally speaking. But when you've had injury issues, especially concussions, constantly being involved physically also puts you in harm's way. At this point, though, it's hard to ask him to change his style. I mean, it's the style that got him to where he is as an amateur star and a first-round pick. Now, the book has not closed on Alex Turcotte, but so far things obviously haven't gone the way anyone would have hoped. When he has been healthy, he's looked like a player that has the ability to play at the NHL level. I think likely not a top 6 forward, but I think he could be a bottom 6 forward at this point. But we're all just hoping at this point that he can just stay healthy, just try and have a full season where he's not hurt. Now, he came up as a center, but at this point, I think he would likely be looking to play on the wing, at least initially, if he can stay healthy. Now, he could play center with the Ontario Reign, but at the NHL level, certainly where the Kings are right now with their centers, it's not like there's an opportunity for him, barring any kind of injury. Maybe a Blake Lizotte injury could open up a spot for him if he's healthy. But again, a lot of ifs there. And if he is going to play, say, on the wing on the Kings' 4th line, he'd be competing right now with guys like Trevor Lewis, Carl Grundstrom, and Jarrett Anderson-Dolan. Now, Alex Turcotte's 22, going to be a restricted free agent after this season. But again, at this point, everyone just hoping he can stay healthy, have a full season, show what he can do, and maybe get an opportunity to play some games at the NHL level. I think at this point, it's just, again, fingers crossed that during training camp, he stays healthy, probably looking for a healthy and productive run for the first few months of the AHL. And then maybe, depending on what's going on with the Kings, maybe you decide to give him a shot, to give him a few weeks. Again, though, there's a lot of dominoes that have to fall between now and then for that to happen. But I think it's fair to say this season, next season are crossroads seasons for Alex Turcotte to determine if he's going to be able to play at the NHL level or not. But again, how can you determine that unless he's healthy? Unless, as the cliche goes, the best ability is your availability sometimes. And unfortunately, it's been in and out of the lineup for Alex Turcotte. So again, just stay healthy. Hopefully he can get off to a good start with the Ontario Reign. And then maybe if he has a couple of months of solid play and maybe there's some openings there with the Kings, maybe he can get a chance to show what he could do on the fourth line. But again, that remains to be seen. Maybe it's just play a full AHL season, be productive, and then next season, maybe you kind of hit the ground running. But Alex Turcotte, again, certainly was a great pick for the Kings when they selected him. There was a lot of expectations. Obviously, when you go 5th overall in a draft there, and we mentioned some of the players he's played with. They've gone on to become already young NHL stars. So the bar was set high for him. He, unfortunately, because of the injuries, has not come close to even be able to jump over that bar. But again, Alex Turcotte, an intriguing player. I think a player that we still have hopes for. Although I can understand why a lot of Kings fans and maybe even some of the Kings organization probably have the attitude of we're not counting on him to contribute, but if something great happens and he can add something to this roster, that would be certainly a much welcome surprise for the Kings here. But I think right now, the way things have gone, you can understand why the Kings maybe feel like we're not counting on him to be there at this point. But if things can change, if he can stay healthy, if he can get a chance to show what he can do, maybe, just maybe, there's still an opportunity for Alex Turcotte at the NHL level. By the way, I mentioned on Monday's show, and I just realized this when I was doing some research on Alex Turcotte, that the Kings signed defenseman Andreas Englund as one of the free agent signings over the weekend. He'll be playing in Ontario with the Reign, along with Alex Turcotte. Englund was the player that put a headshot on Alex Turcotte in a AHL playoff game season before last that gave Turcotte one of his concussions and resulted in a suspension for Andreas Englund. And now they're going to be teammates in Ontario. So that will be an interesting situation. That said, we talked about Matt Roy earlier, and you may not remember, but he got hurt on a cheap shot from Kevin Fiala when Fiala was playing for the Wild, and they certainly have seemed to put that behind them and move forward as teammates. Hopefully Alex Turcotte and Andreas Englund can do that as well, but a little bit of an awkward situation with those two guys now being on the same team together. And I wonder if the Kings even considered that when they were thinking about signing him. I'm guessing not. Coming up, I'm going to give you my All-American, all-time Kings lineup. That is next on Locked on LA Kings, your team every day. After you finish with this show, I would encourage you to check out Locked on NHL. They'll keep you up to date on all the things going on around the NHL, including the latest free agent signings and news from across the league. That is Locked on NHL, available on YouTube and your favorite podcast apps. So to wrap up this Independence Day themed show, I thought it would be fun to see what would be the LA Kings all-time American-born lineup. Now, this is only for players that were obviously born in America and that played most of their careers with the LA Kings, or at least some significant time, a couple of seasons. So we'll start it off with the easiest pick of all, and that would be in net. It's the greatest goalie in Kings history. It is the man from Milford, Connecticut, and that would be Jonathan Quick. There is zero debate here. He leads every major statistical category for goalies in Kings history. So Jonathan Quick is definitely your starting goalie. However, his backup, that's a little bit more difficult. In the end, I actually went with Cal Peterson from Waterloo, Iowa. The other choices were guys like Rob Stauber and Jack Campbell. And Cal did a little bit more than those guys and did it at a little bit higher level than those guys. So ironically, the Kings' all-time U.S.-born tandem in net are the two guys who started last season with the LA Kings, Jonathan Quick and Cal Peterson. As for the forwards, I did play around a little bit with centers and wingers. I think that's acceptable. So my top line forwards are Ithaca, New York's Dustin Brown, and the current all-time Kings games played leader, top 10 in assists and points, another no-brainer. He is joined on the Kings top line of American-born players with the aforementioned Tony Granato, the former head coach of Alex Turcotte at the University of Wisconsin. The native of Downers Grove, Illinois, played 380 games for the LA Kings in the late 80s and mid 90s. He posted 305 points with the Kings, and from one of the more famous families in the NHL, the Granatos, and his wife, Cami Granato. He is joined by Southfield, Michigan's Jimmy Carson, who played in 219 games in the late 80s for the Kings. He scored 219 points and had a 55-goal season in 1987. My second line for the LA Kings of American-born players would be led off by the man they called Smoke, Brian Smolinski from Toledo, Ohio. He was with the Kings in the late 90s to early 2000s, played 295 games in LA and had 191 points. Joining him is Salt Lake City, Utah native Trevor Moore, back with the Kings after a couple seasons away. Spent his first 12 seasons in LA and is a two-time Stanley Cup winner with the Kings. In 674 games with the Kings, he has 163 points. And he is joined on the second line by the recently departed Alex Iafallo, a native of Eden, New York. In 420 career games in LA, Iafallo finished with 204 points. The third line for my all-time Kings U.S.-born players is Craig Johnson from St. Paul, Minnesota. Played with the Kings in the mid-90s to early 2000s. In 429 career games in LA, he had 141 points. He's joined by Detroit, Michigan native Mike Donnelly. He played for the Kings in the early to mid-90s. 307 games in LA. He finished with 120 points. And current King Trevor Moore from, of course, Thousand Oaks, California, is also on my third line of the LA Kings all-time U.S.-born team. Trevor's been with the Kings since 2019. He's played in 263 games in LA with 118 points. And the fourth line, as usual, with the Kings currently, Lindstrom, Minnesota native Blake Lizotte would be on the fourth line. He's been a King since 2018, obviously currently still a King as well. 258 games with the Kings. He has 91 points and counting. He's joined by Potsdam, New York native Craig Conroy, who played for the Kings in 2005 and 2006, 130 games in LA. Craig Conroy had 82 points. And finally, Bobby Carpenter from Beverly, Massachusetts. He was a King in the late 80s, played 120 games in LA and had 83 points. So those are my four forward lines for the LA Kings all-time U.S.-born team. Of course, the defense, you've got a pairing of Alex Martinez from Rochester Hills, Michigan, and Grand Ledge, Michigan's Matt Green. Now, Marty played 597 games in LA, couple of big overtime postseason goals you might remember, and of course, a two-time Stanley Cup winner. Matt Green, also a winner of 2 Stanley Cups with the LA Kings. He played in 464 games with Los Angeles. The second pairing on the blue line is Jack M.F. Johnson from Indianapolis, Indiana. He was an LA King in the mid to late 2000s, played 343 games in a Kings uniform. He is joined by Buffalo, New York's Aaron Miller, who played for the Kings from the early to mid 2000s. He played 309 games in LA. And my third pairing defense of American-born players for the LA Kings, I'm going to go with Rob Scuderi from Soiset, New York. He was a member of the 2012 Stanley Cup winning team for the Kings. He played in 306 career games with LA. And he's joined by the man we started this show with, born in Detroit, Michigan, Matt Roy. He's played in 288 career games, all in LA, and counting. I think the only American-born head coach the Kings have ever had was Robbie Ftorek from Needham, Massachusetts. He coached the Kings for 2 seasons in the late 80s, so I guess he'd have to be the coach of the team. So that's it. That is our list on this July 4th of the All-American-born LA Kings lineup. Hope you enjoyed this July 4th themed show. If I missed anyone, if I omitted anyone, or if I picked someone that you thought wasn't as deserving as someone else, let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Thought that was fun, and hope you enjoyed it. So, for you everydayers, those of you that listen and watch Locked on LA Kings every day, coming up the rest of the week, we are going to have, with the Kings opening of their development camp, We're going to take a look at some of the Kings' recent prospects and draft picks and update you on how they've been doing and some of the guys who we'll see at the Toyota Sports Center in El Segundo when the Kings open up that development camp coming up on Thursday. On Thursday's show as well, we are scheduled to be joined by Harrison Lee. He is the host of Locked On Winnipeg Jets. He's going to give us some inside information on the Kings' big offseason acquisition, forward Pierre-Luc Dubois. And on Friday's show, we'll have our weekly LA Kings fan feedback show. You want to get your comments in on that, the topics we've talked about so far, the big weekend for the Kings and the signings that they made. Obviously, today's show talking about the U.S.-born players, Matt Roy and Alex Turcotte, or that team of U.S.-born players that I had for the LA Kings. If you got any thoughts on that, anything at all, doesn't even have to be anything we talk about, something on the Kings, you can send me an email always at lockedoneddie@gmail.com. That's EDDIE, lockedoneddie@gmail.com is the email address, which is open for business 24/7. If you're watching on the YouTube channel, you can always post your thoughts in the comments below. We would love for you to stay connected with the show by following us on Twitter and Instagram. We are at Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you for listening and watching Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Have a great 4th of July. Stay safe out there. Enjoy your barbecuing like I'm going to do as soon as I'm done with this. And we will talk to you tomorrow. And as always, go Kings, go.